Okay, today we begin with a question you may have never asked, or perhaps one you've quietly wondered. In your darkest moments, what if your pain isn't punishment, but a path you're scrolling? Another highlight, another filtered smile. The world tells you to chase comfort, success, validation, and yet, in the quiet moments, after loss, heartbreak, or failure, there's a different kind of invitation. Not to run, but to listen. What if your deepest struggles aren't detours, but doorways? What if the heaviness you carry is not a weight meant to crush you, but a pressure meant to form you? Welcome to Stoic Dhamma, a space where we explore the wisdom of ancient Stoic philosophy through the lens of everyday life. Here, we don't escape discomfort, we learn to walk through it, slowly, deliberately. Today, we follow the teachings of Marcus. There's a quiet truth that sits beneath the noise of modern life. Everyone suffers. Some suffer publicly, others in silence. But suffering, in its raw form, is universal. The Stoics didn't try to deny this. They leaned into it, not to glorify pain, but to understand its power. In our current world, pain often feels like a glitch, something to avoid, silence, numb, or scroll past. Yet in ancient philosophy, suffering wasn't a detour, it was the path itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." For the Stoics, pain is not an enemy, it is a teacher. Now imagine if we stopped resisting our pain and began to examine it. Like a traveler reading a map in the rain, what might it reveal about who we are or what we value? The Stoics believe that we become who we are through adversity, not in its absence. When a person is stripped of comfort, distraction, and validation, what remains? That's the raw self, the part you rarely meet when everything is going well. And that self, the Stoics say, is worth knowing. Seneca reminded us, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In other words, suffering is the fire that tempers the blade. Without it, we remain dull to our own potential. But this isn't about romanticizing hardship. It's about reframing it, turning wounds into wisdom. Because suffering, as we know, can break people, it can harden hearts, close minds, and turn bitterness inward. So why did the Stoics see it as sacred? Because, as Epictetus taught, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The pain is real, but the meaning we give it, that's the alchemy. Let's look deeper. Pain often arises when life deviates from our expectations. We expect fairness, recognition, love, stability. When these are threatened, we suffer. The Stoics didn't promise to change the world outside. They offered tools to master the response inside. You might ask, isn't that passive? Shouldn't we try to change our circumstances? Yes, when we can. But the Stoics remind us that control is limited. There's what we can influence and what we must endure. To confuse the two is to multiply our pain. So we begin to shift the question. Instead of asking why me, we ask, what now? Instead of how do I make this go away, we ask, what is this teaching me? Here, the concept of transformational suffering begins to take shape. It's the practice of using hardship as raw material for growth. It's what alchemists tried to do with lead and gold, but the Stoics did it with the soul. And this philosophy isn't only for emperors and scholars, it's for you. The parent struggling with uncertainty, the student facing failure, the artist wrestling with doubt, the caregiver carrying invisible grief. The battlefield may look different, but the flame burns just as hot. Take a simple example, losing a job. To the Stoic, this moment, though painful, is not the end. It's a mirror. It reflects your attachments, your fears, your identity. It asks, who are you when the title is gone? What strength remains when certainty disappears? In this mirror, a new choice appears. React or reflect. You can spiral into despair. Or pause, breathe, begin again, this time from the inside out. This is the essence of daily mindfulness in Stoic practice. Noticing what's happening in the present without running from it. Holding space for discomfort. Observing your emotions like weather patterns, they pass, but they do not define the sky. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor facing wars, betrayal, and plague, wrote these words in his private meditations: "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." He wasn't writing for an audience. He was reminding himself over and over that clarity is found in stillness, and stillness is found in accepting, not escaping. So how can this ancient wisdom live in your life? Begin small. When something hurts, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Breathe through it. Ask what belief, what expectation, what fear is being challenged. The Stoics weren't superhuman. They were simply willing to look pain in the eye and say, "You are not the enemy. You are the lesson." There's a quiet power in this shift. It doesn't erase the suffering, but it reframes it. And sometimes, that's all we need to move forward. Even modern science is beginning to echo this wisdom. Psychological resilience, post-traumatic growth, and mindful awareness are now widely studied. But 2,000 years ago, the Stoics already knew. The mind shapes the meaning. Think of a tree standing in the wind. It doesn't resist the storm by growing harder. It bends, it adapts, and over time, it grows deeper roots. So do we. When we stop resisting the experience of pain, when we make space for it, we begin to draw something new from the depths: courage, humility, endurance. And so we return to the original question, one that now feels less abstract, more personal. What if your pain isn't punishment, but a path? The Stoics answered this not with grand speeches, but with how they lived in hardship, in exile, in illness, in war. They walked the path themselves, not because they had no choice, but because they believed the soul is shaped through friction. This path isn't quick, it isn't gentle, but it is sacred. Along it are moments of quiet strength, piercing clarity, and a kind of peace that isn't born of comfort, but of courage. To understand why they saw pain this way, we have to step back in time, to ancient Rome, to the marketplace, the Senate, the battlefield. What was it about their world, chaotic, brutal, impermanent, that gave birth to this enduring philosophy? Let's go there together. To understand how the Stoics viewed suffering, we must first understand the world they lived in, and it was not a peaceful one. The Roman Empire, for all its architectural glory and military conquest, was a place of immense instability. Emperors rose and fell with brutal swiftness. Plagues swept through crowded cities. Families were torn apart by war, exile, and betrayal. Nothing lasted. In this world, pain wasn't rare. It was woven into the daily fabric of life. And yet, out of this turbulence came one of the most serene and resilient philosophies the world has ever known: Stoicism. The Stoics did not seek to escape suffering. They sought to understand it, to live with it, and even more radically, to use it. Epictetus, once a slave, later a revered teacher, told his students, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Think about that. In a time when he had no control over his own body, chained, beaten, sold, he still claimed dominion over his mind. To Epictetus, suffering began not in the world, but in the interpretation of the world. He believed pain was unavoidable, but suffering was a choice. If we shift how we see an event, we change how we experience it. This radical interiority is the beating heart of Stoic resilience. The outer world could crumble, but the inner fortress, the realm of thought, character, virtue, remained untouched unless you surrendered it. Epictetus asked his students not to avoid discomfort, but to lean into it. Voluntary discomfort, sleeping without a blanket, walking barefoot in winter, fasting. These weren't acts of masochism. They were spiritual training, exercises in detachment, in learning to endure what life might throw unexpectedly by choosing to confront it deliberately. Practice yourself, he said, for heaven's sake in little things, and then proceed to greater. Meanwhile, Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but lived like a monk. He woke before sunrise, wrote in his journal, and reminded himself daily that death was coming, and that pain, betrayal, and failure were not enemies, but inevitabilities. He didn't write for an audience. He wrote for himself, alone at night, surrounded by war and sickness. He penned, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Everything, not just the pleasant, not just the manageable, but everything, insult, illness, death, confusion, can be fuel for the fire of the soul if we choose to let it burn that way. Marcus didn't seek to avoid grief or despair. He welcomed them as parts of the human experience, parts that clarified what mattered. He believed that even in pain, we could find stillness. Seneca, the playwright and philosopher, took it further. Difficulties strengthen the mind. He wrote, "As labor does the body." Seneca's life was filled with contradictions. He advised emperors, accumulated wealth, and yet preached simplicity. But he was no stranger to suffering. He was exiled from Rome, forced to take his own life, and endured constant political threat. And through it all, he viewed suffering not as injustice, but as instruction. To Seneca, adversity wasn't just endurable, it was essential. Without it, we remain untested, unrefined. "Misfortune is virtue's opportunity," he wrote, "that might feel cold in a world that increasingly values comfort." But Stoicism isn't about comfort, it's about clarity and character. Pain reveals. It peels back layers of assumption and ego. It shows us what we cling to and what we fear. It asks questions no easy day ever asks. Who are you, really? What endures when pleasure fades? What values guide you when life no longer rewards you? And that's the Stoic lens. Pain as mirror, pain as teacher, pain as transformation. But it wasn't just lofty philosophy. The Stoics practiced what they preached. They embraced rituals of daily reflection. They visualized loss before it came, a practice now known as negative visualization. They reminded themselves each morning that loved ones might die, wealth might vanish, and health might falter, not to scare themselves, but to prepare, to purify, to deepen their gratitude. It's jarring to modern ears, this idea of meditating on death, on suffering, on decay. But in their world, nothing could be taken for granted. A fever could kill, a betrayal could destroy a family, an emperor's whim could end your life. Stoic practice wasn't intellectual, it was survival. Yet even now, in a world of antibiotics, airbags, and antidepressants, the soul still suffers. Loneliness, disconnection, anxiety, the hunger for meaning, these things are timeless. And so the Stoic view of suffering remains deeply relevant. Because whether it's the death of a friend in ancient Rome, or the quiet collapse of a dream in modern America, pain asks the same thing of us, to feel it, and then to choose. Despair or choose development, collapse or cultivation. The Stoics made a deliberate choice. They chose to cultivate. They trained their hearts the way warriors train their bodies, not to grow cold or closed, but to endure with quiet grace. They believed that wisdom was never about silencing emotion, but recognizing it with clarity. To feel fear and still remain grounded in reason. To feel sorrow and still hold space for love. To feel pain and still stay present with an open heart. In that presence, something unshakable begins to emerge, a deeper strength, not forged in control, but in surrender. A stillness that doesn't resist the world, but meets it. A knowing that even if everything is taken from you, your reason, your values, your choice, these remain untouched. This is not a path of perfection, but of deep personal power. Not power over others, but the ability to master oneself. So when we speak of Stoicism and suffering, we don't mean apathy, we mean intimacy, a conscious walk beside discomfort. This kind of courage is quiet, but transformative, not heroic in scale, but heroic in persistence. Next, we bring Stoicism into the everyday, the real battlefield of the self. Most people think Stoicism belongs to philosophers, emperors, or warriors. But its true power lives in the ordinary, in mornings when you wake up tired, in tense conversations at work, in moments when things simply don't go your way. It's here, not in marble halls or ancient scrolls, where Stoicism becomes real. The small tests shape the self as surely as great tragedies do. Marcus Aurelius, in the quiet of his tent after long days of war, wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't poetry, it was practice, a reminder to bring attention not to what the world throws at you, but to how you meet it. Imagine you're rushing to an appointment, and someone cuts you off in traffic. A client cancels without warning. Your partner says something that stings. In those micro moments of friction, your nervous system tightens. The mind wants to react. This is where the Stoic pause enters, not to suppress your emotions, but to become aware of them. You stop, you breathe, you remember you are not the feeling, you are the space that notices it. Epictetus once taught, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them. The event is external, your suffering is internal, and that space in between, the space of judgment, is where freedom lives over time. That awareness becomes strength each time you choose not to react impulsively, but instead respond. Deliberately, you are rewiring your habits from within. But what happens when the challenge is no longer small? A friend betrays your trust, you lose your job, your health begins to slip. These moments strike deeper, they pierce the ego, the pain feels personal, and yet, Stoicism meets you here too, not to offer quick comfort, but to invite you into something sturdier than reassurance. Self-mastery. Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind. As labor does the body, the Stoic doesn't chase suffering, but doesn't run from it either. They ask instead, what is this pain teaching me? What have I been clinging to? What fear does this moment expose? Pain, in the Stoic view, is diagnostic. It reveals the gap between our expectations and reality, and it challenges us to close that gap through wisdom, not control. To walk this path, the ancient Stoics developed habits, quiet, consistent disciplines that could be practiced daily. Marcus Aurelius journaled each night. He examined where he had acted from virtue and where he had strayed, not to shame himself, but to stay awake. This is daily reflection. You don't need scrolls or Latin, just a notebook and honesty. What moved me today? What did I resist? Where was I guided by wisdom and where by fear? Another practice they held close was negative visualization. Each morning, a Stoic might imagine losing something dear, not out of pessimism, but out of gratitude. What if today I lost my voice, my home, my time with someone I love? Would I regret how I spent this morning? This is not morbid thinking. It is a call to presence. When you imagine the impermanence of what you love, you stop sleepwalking through it. And then there is voluntary discomfort, the art of choosing challenge before life forces it on you. Seneca would sleep on the floor, wear coarse clothes, or fast for days, not to punish himself, but to rehearse freedom. Because when you can face discomfort on your own terms, you strip it of its power. You discover that you are more than your cravings, that your peace does not depend on soft cushions or perfect outcomes, that you can remain calm in cold winds. Try it yourself gently. Skip a meal, walk instead of driving, step into silence for an hour without checking your phone. Let boredom rise and don't rush to fill it. These simple choices forge something rare in a world that chases ease, inner resilience. But Stoicism doesn't stop at individual practice. It extends into our relationships, especially the ones that challenge us. Someone criticizes you unfairly, a friend lets you down, a loved one withdraws. The impulse is to defend, attack, or retreat. But the Stoic looks inward first. Marcus Aurelius reminds us whenever someone does wrong, they've been led to it. Help them, or at least, don't become them. This isn't passivity, it's perspective. You don't condone harm, but you choose not to mirror it. You protect your peace without needing to win. You set boundaries without needing to punish. You love with clarity, not illusion. That is Stoic compassion, firm, but not reactive. And then there is the most intimate arena, your relationship with yourself. When you fail, when you fall short of your ideals, when you feel ashamed, what do you say to yourself? Many people assume Stoicism is about harsh discipline. But Epictetus was clear: no great thing is created suddenly. You are in practice. You are a student of life, and self-kindness is not weakness, it's wisdom. It allows you to keep going. This means when you stumble, you don't collapse. You pause, you reflect, you return, again and again. That rhythm, fall, reflect, return, is the heartbeat of the Stoic path. There's no need to be flawless, just honest, just willing, just aware. With time, all these small practices begin to shift something deep. You don't become emotionless, you become emotionally intelligent. You still feel the sting of failure, the ache of longing, the weight of grief, but you're not enslaved by any of it. You remain grounded, you become the calm center in the storm. And so, the coffee spill becomes training, the missed train becomes practice, the heartbreak becomes revelation. Life stops being something to control and becomes something to collaborate with. This is what the Stoics meant by philosophy as a way of life. It wasn't meant to stay on parchment. It was meant to be walked, breathed, lived, especially in pain, especially when things fall apart, because that's where your true self reveals itself. Not in what happens to you, but in how you respond. From here, we turn to that deeper question: what does pain show us? Not just about the world, but about ourselves. That's where we'll go next. Pain has a way of clarifying things, not immediately. At first, it confuses you, disorients you. It shakes the ground under your feet and leaves you wondering what's left to hold onto. But eventually, when the noise fades, pain does something remarkable. It reveals. It shows you what you truly value, what you fear losing, what you've been avoiding, what illusions you've built around comfort and control. Pain, in that sense, is not just an affliction, it's a mirror. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In other words, what we call suffering, the Stoics often saw as an invitation to uncover who we are beneath the layers of habit, status, and expectation. Imagine this: you lose something important, a relationship ends, a project fails, a diagnosis arrives. In those moments, the world as you knew, it collapses, and suddenly the question isn't how do I get it back, but who am I now without it? That's where the Stoic path begins. Because to lose something and still remain whole, that's a power deeper than possession. The Stoics didn't ask how to avoid loss. They asked how to stand in the midst of it, unshaken in what matters most. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have been made strong enough to bear anything. Your mind adapts, your spirit endures. All that happens was meant for your training." These weren't the words of someone removed from life. He buried children, fought wars, lost friends, carried an empire on his shoulders, and still, he believed. Pain reveals purpose, if we're willing to look. Think about the last time something hurt you deeply, not just physically, but emotionally. Did it not, in some strange way, wake you up? Did it not show you what mattered, what you had taken for granted, what you needed to change, or what you needed to finally let go of? Pain strips away the unnecessary. It makes room for what's essential. The Stoics understood this not as a tragedy, but as a cleansing, like a forest fire that seems destructive, but clears the way for new life, richer soil, stronger growth. And yet, they never denied the human heart. They didn't pretend pain was easy. Epictetus said, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude toward it. You can either accept it or resent it." He did not say, "Don't feel anything." He said, "Feel fully, but choose wisely," because there's a danger in resisting pain. When we try to deny it, escape it, or numb it, we begin to lose touch with the lessons it brings. We create stories to explain it away. We blame, we avoid. But the Stoic path invites a quieter courage to feel the discomfort and remain still enough to hear what it's saying. In that stillness, you may begin to notice your anger wasn't just about what happened. It was about a belief that you were owed something. Your grief wasn't just about loss. It was about how tightly you'd wrapped your identity around what was lost. Your fear wasn't just of the future. It was a fear of uncertainty itself. Pain reveals attachments, and more than that, it reveals your relationship to control. The Stoics taught that suffering increases when we try to grasp what doesn't belong to us. Outcomes, opinions, the behavior of others, even our own bodies. Freedom, they believed, begins the moment we return to what is truly ours, our reasoned choice. That's the turning point. When pain is no longer something happening to you, but something unfolding within you. Something to be met with attention, not avoidance. When you can look at your pain and ask, what is this showing me? What belief is being challenged? What strength is being born in this fire? Then the pain becomes more than bearable. It becomes sacred. You start to see it in others too. The friend who always needs to be right is protecting a deep insecurity. The person who lashes out in anger is often hiding unresolved grief. The partner who pulls away may be afraid of not being enough. When you understand what pain reveals in you, you also begin to see what it reveals in others, and compassion grows. Stoicism isn't cold, it's warm with awareness. It doesn't tell you to shut off, but to see deeper. This insight brings us to a profound realization. The parts of ourselves we meet in pain are often the parts we've ignored, the vulnerable child, the restless ego, the forgotten dream. Pain doesn't destroy us, it simply invites what's hidden to rise. And yet, we resist this rising, don't we? We'd rather distract ourselves. We tell ourselves to move on. We try to stay strong when what we really need is to stay present. But the Stoics knew presence is the highest form of strength. To stand in your suffering with eyes wide open, to feel the ache and still choose virtue, to say, this hurts, and still, I will act from wisdom. This is where you find your real identity, not in the roles you play, but in the principles you hold under pressure. So pain, for the Stoic, is not just a challenge. It is a compass. It points you inward. It sharpens your awareness. It reveals where you are most asleep and asks you to wake up. The world will not always be kind. Loss will come. Change will come. Disappointment will knock again and again. But the gift of this philosophy is that it prepares you not to resist life, but to move through it with resilience, grace, and truth. So the choice is quietly yours. Will pain close you or open you? Harden you or deepen you? The Stoics urge us not to run, but to listen, to let suffering lead us inward, into our values, into our strength, into a wiser self, not as victims, but as students of a deeper life. Pain is inevitable, but the meaning we assign to it is our own. The Stoics never promised a painless life. What they offered was something deeper, the courage to meet suffering with dignity, not to run from it, but to stand with it, to ask, what can I learn from this pain? In that quiet space of reflection, transformation begins. You stop begging the world to be easier. You begin asking yourself to become wiser, not by numbing what you feel, but by understanding it. Not through resistance, but through clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, what stands in the way becomes the way. Seneca wrote, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And Epictetus, once bound in chains, freed the mind by teaching. Control your response, not the world. These teachings are not just ancient quotes. They are living pathways to resilience, integrity, and inner calm. So next time suffering visits, don't turn away. Sit with it, listen, and you may discover it's not here to break you, but to bring you home to yourself. Thank you for walking this journey with us. See you in the next meditation. References: Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. Penguin Classics, 2006. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. Penguin Classics, 2004. Epictetus, Discourses and Selected Writings. Penguin Classics, 2008.